Can you feel that? I feel it going up and down my spine. Thank you for helping that. So today, of course, is Palm Sunday. And the title of my lesson is, You Are Stronger Than Your Fears. And so I'm going to begin with a poem about a mighty oak tree who really is no different than we are. A mighty wind blew night and day and stole the oak tree's leaves away, then snapped its bough and pulled its bark until the oak tree was tired and stark. The weary wind gave up and spoke, How can you be still standing, oak? The oak tree said, I know that you can break each branch of mine in two, carry every leaf away, shake my limbs, and make me sway. But I have roots stretched in the earth, growing stronger since my birth. You'll never touch them, for you see, they are the deepest part of me. Today is known as Palm Sunday because over 2,000 years ago, Jesus rode triumphantly on a donkey into the city of Jerusalem to cheering crowds, waving palms and throwing their cloaks in front of him and shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Palm Sunday marked the end of a 3-year ministry for Jesus, a ministry that ended with the raising of Lazarus from the dead, and that miracle, of course, followed him into Jerusalem, and people were just so excited with him, and he recognized that this really wasn't completion for him. He still had a ways to go, and he still had some difficult things ahead of him, but he accepted that anyway. He loved them anyway, even though intuitively knew that this would be the same crowd that just a little ways down the road would be screaming, Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. But he still accepted their adulation, and he still loved them like the mighty oak. He recognized that he had a benevolent, light spirit in him, and that through that spirit in him, he was able to forgive and to let go and to be stronger than any fears that he may have. And because of that benevolent spirit in him, he was able to accept their praise and love them anyway. You know, when Jesus said, the Father and I are one, and all that the Father has is mine, he really believed it. And that was the key to his success as a healer. He really believed that all that the Father had was his, and that he was one with that presence and power that lived in him and vibrated throughout the universe, returning back to him. And because he believed it, he was able to turn water into wine and heal lepers and feed thousands with a schoolboy's lunch. So today I'm going to invite you to come with me to that place where the crowd has been listening to him for a long time, and there's excitement in the air because Jesus had the ability to touch souls and to lift them from wherever they were. And so there's excitement in the air, and the disciples come to him and say, you know, we really don't want to end right now because they're really, really getting this. They're really excited about what they're hearing, but we've run out of food. And, well, not that we've run out of food, we have no food, and it's time for them to eat. And so, absolutely knowing with no doubt, that in him there was a benevolent presence that attached him to his source, he wasn't afraid. He said, oh dear, what are we going to do about that? Instead, what did he do? He looked around at the crowd, lots of people, and he spots this little boy. And he sees this little boy that did not have his eyes glazed over with experience, indifference, and skepticism. He sees this little boy in the crowd who is pure, who's standing in his own integrity, who is filled with love and light. And he asked him if he would be willing to share his lunch with the crowd. And notice that the story doesn't tell us that the little boy said, well, how could I share this lunch with the crowd? It's just enough for me. No, he said yes, and he gave Jesus his lunch. 2 loaves of bread and 3 little fish. They must have been like sardines, because that's what they put in their sandwiches in those days. And so, to Jesus, knowing who he was, remembering his source, recognizing the power that it gives you to remember that there is a benevolent spirit in you that will do whatever it is you need done, he sees the lunch as a symbol of divine substance. And so when he's holding that lunch in his hand and sees it as a symbol of divine substance, we know that there's no end to divine substance. And so divine substance just goes on and on and on. So he passes it to one, and then they pass it to the next, and then they pass it. And they had baskets left over after they fed the crowd. Now, there could be some exaggeration in the story. Maybe it wasn't thousands, could have been hundreds. But still, feeding a schoolboy's lunch with hundreds, you say impossible, I say no. Because when the light has come and you recognize who you are, you're entitled to miracles. And Jesus said, if you believe what I do, you'll do it too. So you're entitled to miracles too. So what keeps us from feeling that power to say, let it be whatever it is you need to see happening in your life, to see it coming into your life? It is really because, like the little boy, we don't lack experience and indifference and skepticism. We're filled with it. And those are the 3 things that will keep us from demonstrating anything in our lives. First of all, it keeps us from transcendence, because experience keeps us living in the past. And there is no miracle power in the past. So, as long as we're living in the past, remembering the past, holding on to the past, bringing it back up, hashing it and rehashing it, we're blocking the flow of any wonderful miracles that are just dying to embrace us. And indifference makes believing impossible. So some of you were out there listening to the story about, he didn't feed a kid with schoolboys. He didn't feed a crowd with schoolboys' lunch. We all know that. That's all symbolic. Skepticism is keeping you from opening your heart to the fact that you too are entitled to miracles. I believe it with all my heart that Jesus did all the miracles that he did, and that he made it possible for all of us to do it. Because you know what? Once somebody does anything, it paves the way, right? When Myrtle Fillmore was healed of tuberculosis, she made it possible for anybody with a fatal disease to be healed. Because she did it, it's possible for us. Because Jesus did it, it's possible for us. Because he said that the same source that he has, we have, and the same kind of energy connection that he had, we have, but we just have to make sure that we let the experience and the skepticism and the indifference, which keeps us from accepting things by faith. I was reading a book recently about the mysticism of Jesus and realized that in the Eastern philosophy, miracles are natural. They accept them. The gurus and the great teachers, they don't ever question miracles. They expect them to happen in their lives. And they do, because they expect them. And so they understand that you have to get the indifference and the skepticism out, and you've got to get the experience out, because the experience keeps us stuck more than anything. Oh, I just noticed that she reminds me of that woman who told me and hurt my feelings once. I better stay away from her, because she reminds me of that. Or he reminds me of some man that did me in. Oh, experience keeps us from becoming all that we want to be and all that we can be. So if we want this to happen for us, we have got to let go of the experience, the skepticism, and the indifference. And each time we're called, when we accept this, like Jesus did, we are called to prove it. So Jesus lived in this absolute knowing that he had the source in him and that he was capable of connecting to anything in the universe and creating it. And so he had to prove it. So when we accept that for ourselves, we will have to prove it too. And when we have to prove it, then faith is not enough. When we have to prove it, we have to believe it. That's faith. We have to have that. But we have to let go of the world standard of facts. The world standard of facts was that you can't feed hundreds with a schoolboy's lunch. The world standard of facts was that you can't heal leprosy. It was incurable. The world standard of facts was that you cannot command an angry sea to be calm and it'll be calm. So in order to make these things happen that he said we're capable of, we have got to let go of the world standard of facts. We have to just take that out of our mind because we know that the mind that serves spirit is unlimited forever in every way, beyond the laws of space and time. Those are facts. And so when you recognize that, then you will be able to do what he did. You will be able to change the world around you. And so the next time that you find yourself challenged in any way, that you have a crisis of some kind, because we're always called to prove what we believe. And sometimes you almost wish you didn't believe because you're always called to prove it. But when you're called to prove it the next time, then just remember the oak. Remember how the oak tree stood there in spite of the wind, trying to destroy it because it had roots that were so deep that it could never be moved. Speak your truth without the fear. Just speak it because it's impossible to reach heaven with fear beside you. Heaven is a high consciousness where anything that you want to see happening can happen, but you can't get there with fear beside you. And so speak to your fear, just like Jesus spoke to the waves, and say, be still, and move into that place where you can speak into your fears and see what happens. It's amazing what will. So remember that throughout his 3-year ministry on earth, Jesus was teaching us that like the mighty oak, we have this very deep, benevolent presence in us that is much, much stronger than our fears. And so, like the mighty oak, remember, I have roots stretched in the earth, growing stronger since my birth. You'll never touch them, for you see, they are the deepest part of me. So, not only do you have to recognize those roots, but the benevolent presence that created those roots, and act as if it's working, just as Jesus did. Say thank you before the fact, because Jesus always said thank you before the fact. Say thank you before the fact, and then act as if it's already working. And so our affirmation for today is, like Jesus, I recognize that benevolent presence inside of me. Like Jesus, I recognize that benevolent presence inside of me. Let's say that together. Like Jesus, I recognize that benevolent presence inside